And coming along after the news will be Simon Wilson, but first a look at the weather. Apart from isolated showers, it should be another fine night with minimums around 28 Celsius, sunny and very hot during the day tomorrow, with maximums of at least 33 degrees and light to moderate southerly winds. Latest at the observatory, 30 Celsius with humidity at 89%.
RTHK News.
It's 10 o'clock. I'm Robert Kemp. The police say they have arrested 10 people in an operation under the national security law. The founder of Apple Daily, Jimmy Lai, was among the first to be held early this morning. Prominent pro-democracy activist Agnes Chow has been arrested at her home this evening. About 200 officers raided the newspaper's headquarters in Cheung Kwan O this morning, taking away 25 boxes of material as evidence. The other people arrested are understood to include executives of Next Media and Mr. Lai's two sons. Senior Police Superintendent Steve Lai from the National Security Department said they have allegedly used a foreign bank account to fund operations that led to last Friday's U.S. sanctions.
We have to focus on the two offenses. Allegation. The first one is the offense under the national security law, namely the colluding with the foreign power. And the other one is a conspiracy to default, involving some cheating behavior of having a lower rent for the factories of that and that. That's all about the individual behaviors. Nothing about the company itself.
He also said officers had to search the floor where the editorial department was located because the suspects' offices were there, but he insisted they had avoided any used material. 8 journalist groups have expressed strong opposition to the arrest of Mr. Lai and the raid on Apple Daily. They also criticised the police for, as they put it, screening which reporters could get close to the building to cover the raid. Spokesman for Next Media's union, Alex Lam, says it's no exaggeration to say that this was the day that Hong Kong's press freedom died.
The scale of the search is really unprecedented. The number of officers they deployed, I think it is out of proportion to an extent that I think they are actually demonstrating their ability to enter a news organization at will. And it is a way to intimidate us, and also they're trying to make sources to think twice before talking to us, maybe. So in many levels, this is a very bad day for press freedom.
The Hong Kong Macau Affairs Office has applauded the arrests and called for people who colluded with foreign forces and harmed national security to be severely punished. The office says in a statement that Jimmy Lai is one such figure and accused him of planning and organising illegal protests, using his media to spread rumours and incite violence, and providing financial support for anti-China and pro-independence forces. The office says Mr. Lai must be punished under the rule of law, and his arrest showed that justice may be late but never absent. The European Union urged respect for human rights and freedom of expression following the arrest. The European Union Foreign Affairs spokesman said the recent arrest of Jimmy Lai, members of his family and other individuals, and the raid on the offices of newspaper Apple Daily and allegations of collusion with foreign forces further stoke fears that the national security law is being used to stifle freedom of expression and of the media in Hong Kong. Britain accused China of using the national security law as a pretext to silence opposition. An international coalition of campaigners and lawyers, including exiled Hong Kong activist Nathan Law, says it's planning to launch a private prosecution in the UK of senior British officers serving in the SAR's police force. They say they will accuse the officers, or who they haven't named, of engaging in torture of pro-democracy demonstrators over the past year. Michael Polak, a human rights barrister who is assisting with the case, said it was almost impossible to hold the Hong Kong police accountable. He says a private prosecution of senior expatriate officers is one of the few options left.
Independent Police Complaints Council is not able to carry out objective investigations into what has taken place in Hong Kong. Further, the national security law means that bringing any action against the Hong Kong police within Hong Kong would be very difficult, as giving evidence against the Hong Kong police could be interpreted as subversion.
4 more Indonesian domestic helpers who stayed at a boarding house in Sheung Wan have been confirmed as having COVID-19. All of them shared a dormitory with another helper who was previously confirmed as having the disease. Centre for Health Protection reported 69 new cases today. 45 were linked to previous infections. The government says it will extend the current anti-epidemic measures for another week. until August the 18th. The measures include mandatory mask wearing at all public venues, limiting social gatherings to 2 people, as well as a ban on dining in at all restaurants from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. And that's the news from RTHK.
Radio 3 Weather.
A look at the weather forecast for tonight and tomorrow. Mainly fine apart from isolated showers. Minimum temperature of 28 degrees. Very hot during the day tomorrow. Maximum of around 33 degrees in town and a couple of degrees higher in the New Territories. Winds will be light to moderate southerlies. The outlook will be occasional showers and thunderstorms on Wednesday and Thursday, with the showers easing off towards the weekend. Currently at the observatory, the air temperature is 30 degrees Celsius. Relative humidity stands at 80% and the very hot weather warning remains in effect.
RTHK News.
It's 11 o'clock. I'm Robert Kemp. Tonight's headlines. Police reportedly arrest Agnes Chow under the national security law. Apple Daily remains defiant despite a police raid and the arrest of several of its executives. Veteran journalists condemn the police action and speak of the death of press freedom. And Beijing announces sanctions against 11 Americans after the US targeted Hong Kong and mainland officials last week. Police have arrested pro-democracy activist Agnes Chow under the national security law. A statement on her social media account says. Tom McAlinden has details.
A message posted on Agnes Chow's Facebook page in the evening said a number of police officers had turned up at her home. The post said the activist was still inside and a lawyer was rushing to the scene. A new post around an hour later, though, said she'd been arrested under the national security law. The message, said to be from an admin of the account, said Ms. Chow was arrested on the charge of inciting secession. It quoted a lawyer as saying the police had arrived armed with a search warrant issued last Thursday. Meanwhile, former Demosisto party mate Nathan Law also confirmed Ms. Chow had been taken into custody just hours after a series of other arrests under the national security law. He said he was still trying to find out more information about the arrests on what was a horrible day in Hong Kong. On Sunday, Ms. Chow had posted on Facebook that suspicious men were apparently keeping watch on her home.
Apple Daily's editor-in-chief says the paper will continue to be published no matter what, despite police arresting founder Jimmy Lai and other executives under the national security law. Staff returned to work earlier after police ended their hours-long raid of Apple Daily's offices in Tseung Kwan O. Officers took away 25 boxes of items they said were being seized as evidence. The force says it has arrested 10 people in total, 4 on suspicion of colluding with foreign forces, 4 on suspicion of fraud, and 2 on suspicion of both offences. Alex Lam, a senior reporter at Apple Daily, says the police took away a lot of documents, even though he says their search warrant did not entitle them to seize any news material.
At this moment, we don't have a very good idea of what exactly did they take, but we have made it clear that we will continue our operations as a newspaper, as an online news outlet, and tomorrow's newspaper will be published as usual.
Veteran journalist Keith Richberg, the director of the University of Hong Kong's Journalism and Media Studies Centre, says the raid on Apple Daily was outrageous. He says because the new security law allows for closed-door trials, the public may never know why Mr. Lai and his colleagues were arrested.
Mark your calendars. Today is the day freedom of speech and freedom of the press died in Hong Kong, when the police arrested newspaper publisher and executives and the head of the animation service. And they actually walk in with huge numbers of officers into a newsroom. I think that's the day you could say press freedom officially died. And it didn't die a natural death. It was killed. It was killed by Beijing, and it was killed by Carrie Lam and the Hong Kong police.
The Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office has applauded the arrests and called for people who collude with foreign forces and harm national security to be severely punished. The office claims in a statement that Jimmy Lai is one such person, accusing him of planning and organising illegal protests, using his media to spread rumours and incite violence, and providing financial support for anti-China and pro-independence forces. A leader of Beijing's top think tank on Hong Kong, Lau Siu-kai, says the arrest of Jimmy Lai appears to be in line with state policy. The Vice President of the Chinese Association of Hong Kong and Macau Studies says the US sanctions on Hong Kong and mainland officials will result in Beijing taking a stronger stance against those deemed to be too close to the US.
I'm not sure whether they try to action, but the arrest of Jimmy Lai most likely is in line with the tough policy of China toward the United States and the local forces closely aligned with the United States, or the objective of the Chinese policy toward Hong Kong. Given the fact that Beijing has already warned that the local forces, which are closely linked to the United States, have to be aware that they were seen as being hostile to China and work together with external forces against Hong Kong and China.
The Foreign Ministry says it will impose sanctions against 11 Americans, including Senators Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, in response to Washington's move last Friday to slap sanctions on 11 Hong Kong and mainland government officials. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian says China has decided to impose sanctions on people who have behaved badly on Hong Kong-related issues. Also on the list are Human Rights Watch Director Kenneth Ross and National Endowment for Democracy President Carl Gershman. You're tuned to RTHK. The time is just coming up to 5 minutes past 11. An international coalition of activists and lawyers, among them exiled Hong Kong campaigner Nathan Law, are planning to launch a private prosecution in the UK against senior British officers serving in the SAR's police force. They're accusing them of engaging in torture against demonstrators in the past year. Priscilla Ung reports.
No police officers have been named at this point, but according to the private prosecution case, senior British officers here are accused of torturing pro-democracy protesters over the past year by, for example, stamping on their heads, kneeling on their necks, and employing methods that contravene international policing norms and violate human rights law. Barrister Michael Polak, a specialist in human rights and criminal law who is assisting in the case, said because it is almost impossible to hold the Hong Kong police accountable for their actions, a private prosecution of senior British expatriate officers is among the few options they could take to follow up on the matter.
Independent Police Complaints Council is not able to carry out objective investigations into what has taken place in Hong Kong. Further, the national security law means that bringing any action against the Hong Kong police within Hong Kong would be very difficult, as giving evidence against the Hong Kong police could be interpreted as subversion.
Mr. Polak said as British nationals, the officers concerned could be prosecuted for offences over which the UK claims universal jurisdiction, including the crime of torture. Hong Kong Watch fellow Luc de Pulvert, who is commissioning the case, said the officers would be held accountable for inflicting or overseeing the torture of pro-democracy protesters.
Our message to British police in Hong Kong is simple. You may escape justice in Hong Kong, but if in the midst of your Hong Kong dream you had forgotten that you remain answerable to British law, you will be reminded.
The prosecution said it's now gathering evidence and called for witness testimonies concerning incidents of abuse or sexual assault in police custody. It is also appealing for information regarding the CITIC Tower incident on June the 12th last year, when rounds of tear gas were fired at a large number of protesters who had gathered outside the building during an authorized protest. Exiled Hong Kong activist Nathan Law said there seems to be a very solid case building up.
Actually, we have a potentially solid case, but we indeed need the public support. And the world is watching, even though we cannot seek for justice in Hong Kong, but justice has to be done.
The group has also kick-started a crowdfunding campaign aimed at raising £200,000 to pay for the legal fees.
Health Secretary Sophia Chan says she expects between 4 and 5 million Hong Kong residents to take up the offer of a free COVID-19 test in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, the Federation of Trade Unions says the government should roll out a health code system to help show who has tested negative for the virus and who hasn't. Jimmy Choi reports.
The government said last week that the central government will help it offer a free coronavirus test to anyone in Hong Kong who wants one, starting in about 2 weeks' time. 3 mainland labs will be responsible for the testing. On an RTHK program, the health minister said the government is still trying to work out the details of the scheme, such as whether people should take a deep throat saliva test or a throat swab test, and whether samples should be collected by people themselves or by staff. Professor Chan says she expects between 4 and 5 million Hong Kong residents will opt for the free test. FTU lawmaker Alice Mack, meanwhile, says her party is urging the government to hire temporary staff and provide training so they can help collect samples from those going for the tests, especially the elderly who may have difficulty in doing it by themselves. She says the government should also provide tests for high-risk groups, such as frontline civil servants, as soon as possible. Speaking after a meeting with the Secretary for Home Affairs, Casper Cho, Ms. Mack also said they hope the government can roll out a so-called health code system, so people who have tested negative for the virus can be given a digital certificate, allowing them access to certain venues and facilities.
We hope the government can introduce the health code so that some business and some economic development can still continue. By introducing the health code, people are encouraged to do the test voluntarily on a regular basis, so that we can, through this regular test, we can identify who may have the virus but without symptoms. So this may help to contain the pandemic and as well as to promote the well-being economy.
She said with this system in place, businesses such as beauty and massage parlors, gyms and tutoring centers could resume their operations. The lawmaker brushed aside any concerns that such a scheme would allow the government to have access to people's health data, saying the administration has to comply with laws over how it collects and stores people's personal data. She added that people had no qualms about joining the government's $10,000 cash handout scheme earlier this year, and she can't see why people should react differently when it comes to the health code system.
Another 4 foreign domestic workers who stayed at a boarding house in Shenzhen have been confirmed as having caught COVID-19. All of them were in a dormitory with a helper who was previously found to be infected. Dr. Tuan Shekwan of the Center for Health Protection was asked if she's worried the cluster will expand.
We have located almost all the domestic helpers. So we either put them under quarantine or offer them testing. So far, there's one more in the quarantine center. I think so far tested negative.
A 78-year-old private doctor has also come down with the disease. Dr. Chuang says the doctor visited 2 rehabilitation centers during his infectious period and 8 elderly care homes during his incubation period.
Hopefully, I think he has taken necessary personal protective equipment and infection control measures. If that is the case, the chance of spread in the residential care homes are not high.
Health officials reported a total of 69 new coronavirus infections today, with another 30 people found to be positive in preliminary tests. Representatives of the sport and recreation sector have urged the government to offer a new round of support, saying the criteria for an earlier payout of $100,000 were too strict. Wong Ying-ting reports.
About a dozen people joined Civic Party District Councillor Shen Li to make the call for more anti-pandemic funding. Some said their businesses had received nothing from the earlier support package because they didn't meet the strict definitions set by the administration, while others said they hadn't received enough. Mr. Li says the government should consult the industry.
We demand for subsidies that based on different scales of the fitness centers. The PPS allowance provided by the government is totally in accordance with the demand that we are asking for. We hope the government can have more consultation with our sector and know more about the actual operation of our industry.
Dance studio owner Angela, who has been in the sector for more than 20 years, says she closed one of her 2 centers due to the pandemic, and she hasn't received any money from the government yet.
My studio is like the medium size. I have to pay like $75,000 per month, and at the same time, most of our tutors, they didn't get anything at all, because they work in my studio as a part-time, and at the same time they work in other studio. So the other studio is exactly the same situation of mine.
A gym owner who did receive a payout, meanwhile, said it covered only a fraction of his rent. He argued that firms with higher costs ought to receive more money.
RTHK's Board of Advisors says the public broadcaster should train staff to better understand their role in promoting national identity. Working group set up by the board met the Director of Broadcasting, Leung Ka-wing, this morning to discuss RTHK's complaints mechanism. Board Chairman Eugene Chan says he hopes the advisors can be told of any major complaints, and then Mr. Leung will be more open.
He said to us that being a media person, he would prefer to choose a low-profile stance, and he would delegate others to speak on behalf of him. But I have said it categorically that being the leader, being the chief editor, the public, the staff will look to his leadership. Our advice is to ensure the charter would be fully instilled amongst our colleagues, to not only knowing the words, but knowing the spirit and intent, and hopefully the culture can be expressed in all our programs, such as when we have to promote our civic society and also our national identity.
RTHK is currently the subject of a government-led management review following a series of controversies over its programs, which have been accused of being biased and anti-police. A reminder of our top stories tonight. Apple Daily remains defiant despite a police raid and the arrest of several executives. Veteran journalists condemn the police action and speak of the death of press freedom. And Beijing announces sanctions against 11 Americans after the US targeted Hong Kong and mainland officials last week. The news from RTHK.
RTHK Radio 3. Radio 3 weather.
A look at the weather for Hong Kong for the 11th of August 2020. Mainly fine apart from isolated showers, minimum temperature of 28. Very hot during the day. Maximum temperature will be 33 degrees in town and a couple of degrees higher in the New Territories. Winds will be light to moderate southerlies. The outlook: occasional showers and thunderstorms on Wednesday and Thursday. Fewer showers in the following few days. Currently, the air quality health index is low with readings of 1 and 2. Air temperatures 29 degrees Celsius. Relative humidity is 82%. And the very hot weather warning is in effect.
RTHK News.
It's midnight. I'm Robert Kemp. Police arrested pro-democracy activist Agnes Chow under the national security law. A statement on her social media account says. Tom McClendon has details.
A message posted on Agnes Chow's Facebook page in the evening said a number of police officers had turned up at her home. The post said the activist was still inside and a lawyer was rushing to the scene. A new post around an hour later, though, said she'd been arrested under the national security law. The message, said to be from an admin of the account, said Ms. Chow was arrested on the charge of inciting secession. It quoted a lawyer as saying the police had arrived armed with a search warrant issued last Thursday. Meanwhile, former Demosisto party mate Nathan Law also confirmed Ms. Chow had been taken into custody just hours after a series of other arrests under the national security law. He said he was still trying to find out more information about the arrests on what was a horrible day in Hong Kong. On Sunday, Ms. Chow had posted on Facebook that suspicious men were apparently keeping watch on her home.
Apple Daily's editor-in-chief says the paper will continue to be published no matter what, despite police arresting founder Jimmy Lai and other executives under the national security law. Staff returned to work earlier yesterday after police ended their hours-long raid of Apple Daily's office in Cheung Kwan O. Officers took away 25 boxes of items they said were being seized as evidence. The force says it has arrested 10 people in total, 4 on suspicion of colluding with foreign forces, 4 on suspicion of fraud, and 2 on suspicion of both offences. Alex Lam, a senior reporter at Apple Daily, says the police took away a lot of documents, even though he says their search warrant did not entitle them to seize any news material.
At this moment, we don't have a very good idea of what exactly did they take, but we have made it clear that we will continue our operations as a newspaper, as an online news outlet, and tomorrow's newspaper will be published as usual.
The Security Bureau says it will not comment on operational details. However, it said police have a responsibility to collect evidence and search warrants are applied for in accordance with the law and procedures. It said any search would be carried out according to the authorization under the warrant. The Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office has applauded the arrests and called for people who collude with foreign forces and harm national security to be severely punished. The office claims in a statement that Jimmy Lai is one such person, accusing him of planning and organising illegal protests, using his media to spread rumours and incite violence, and providing financial support for anti-China and pro-independence forces. The European Union urged respect for human rights and freedom of expression following the arrest. The European Union Foreign Affairs spokesman said the recent arrest of Jimmy Lai, members of his family and other individuals, and the raid on the offices of newspaper Apple Daily under allegations of collusion with foreign forces further stoked fears that the national security law is being used to stifle freedom of expression and of the media in Hong Kong. Britain accused China of using the national security law as a pretext to silence opposition. Another 4 foreign domestic workers who stayed at a boarding house in Shenzhen have been confirmed as having caught COVID-19. All of them were in a dormitory with a helper who was previously found to have been infected. Dr. Huan Shuquan for the Center for Health Protection was asked whether she was worried about the cluster expanding.
We have located almost all the domestic helpers. So we either put them under quarantine or offer them testing. So far, there's one more in the quarantine center. I think so far tested negative.
The centre reported 69 new cases yesterday, of which 2 were imported. Of the local cases, 45 were linked to previous infections. Federation of Trade Unions is urging the government to speed up the implementation of a health code system. It would allow people who test negative for the coronavirus to access certain facilities. It comes as the administration prepares to offer free tests to anyone who wants one. FTU members met the Home Affairs Secretary, Casper Choi, to discuss the scheme yesterday afternoon. Lawmaker Alice Mack says codes will help contain the virus.
The objective of the health code is to ensure that the person with this health code, after they go through some tests, they get identified as negative. That means there will not be any people without symptoms, but they are carrying the virus, that they will help to spread the virus in the community. So this health code is in fact a measure to help to contain the virus.
News from RTHK.